Hello Mouses! Today's episode is sponsored by Optical Illusions. So I've been looking at the calendar recently because I have appointments coming up, and I was wondering, why do we use AD, or in some circumstances CE, to differentiate our calendar from other calendars? Because let's look at what these words actually mean. AD is Anno Domini. It's very much a Christian-centred calendar, so I'm not sure it's appropriate for the entire world, and a lot of the world don't actually agree because they have different calendars. So that brings me to the problem of calling it CE, because that's Common Era. Well, it's not common, is it? It's the one that's used by a lot of people, but other people use another one. Isn't the Jewish calendar in the 5000s by now? Whereas we're just here with our nice shiny 2000s. We haven't even got to there yet. And then the problem struck me of, well, what else can we use? Because we've got to keep the calendar we've got. We've got to the 2000s. We're not going to go back to 1 now, are we? So 2011, 2012, 1, 2, 3. That's not going to work. People are going to get a bit annoyed. Say, what happened to that? We did all that effort. So I thought about some alternatives, and the one I came up with was Western calendar, because it seems appropriate. The calendar that we're using and that we're talking about here is a very Western calendar. It comes from the Roman Empire. It's a Christian calendar, the Julian, then altered by the Gregorians. It's the calendar pushed forward by the West, and which has continued to be in use because the West is currently powerful. So Western calendar sounds pretty good. And then you think, well, the initials for that are WC, and that stands for water closet. So I don't really want my calendar named after a toilet, so we've got to think of something else. So my problem there is there isn't really an appropriate alternative. So what do? Do we just call it the calendar? But it's not the calendar. It's one of several calendars. Do we call it this calendar? Like 2012 TC? Well, of course it's this calendar. We're not talking about that calendar, because that calendar is 5000 or 7. And there you go. So what do? It's not an astral calendar. We're not counting 5 billion or 15 billion or whatever. We're not counting from the start of the Earth. We're not counting from the start of the universe. We could. We have a pretty good idea of when that is. So perhaps we should switch calendars to something else. But then again, we have the problems. Well, we've counted to 2012 already. We don't want to give up that effort. So, bit of a problem. So what do? And on that count, I'm not really sure. So for the moment, I'm just going to keep calling it 2012. And I'm just going to leave off anything else. Because perhaps we don't actually need it in the end. Perhaps all we need is to know by context that we're talking about our calendar. And maybe that's just good enough. Good enough seems good enough for me. And on that note, I've been Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching a video, and I'll see you on Monday.